This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
So
was the interruption.
I got 3 orange dots up top. Looks like we're all doing good. So CAS, what are we doing today, man?
All right, guys. Well, we're glad to have Philip Wright on the podcast this afternoon. Philip refers to himself as a CEO, father, mentor, leader, and free thinker, and a man of accountability. He's got a GED from the University of the District of Columbia. He's a father of 4, and he's got a bunch of experience, mostly in the IT world. But his current position is as a network engineer. And so, Philip, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Be One Change One podcast,
Thanks.
brother.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to have you on.
Before we get going too deep, man, I want you to tell us about how you guys met and how we got to having Philip, because it's very random, right?
Totally random.
It is. We talk about random chance encounters and how you never know when you're going to meet a person. I was just talking about this last night with the ladies about how you never know you're going to meet a person and they're going to change your life. You know, maybe it's a conversation, maybe it's a handshake, and maybe it's not immediate. Maybe it's 5 years from now. But the way that you two guys met and we ended up here, the 3 of us in this virtual room, is kind of unique. So tell that story.
You want to tell it, Philip? I'll let you start, brother.
All right, go ahead. Yeah. So, I was traveling out to California on a work assignment and had a really rough day. I was having a hard time adjusting to the West Coast time. And I just wanted to go sit at the bar and have me a cocktail so that way I can decompress and relax and prepare myself to sleep. And I remember vividly there were some women sitting across from me and they were just going on and on and on. I'm just like, oh, brother. And CAS says, you might as well go and get another one, man, because it only gets better from here. And just instantly, I was like, okay, you sparked up a conversation. He saw my shirt. I was wearing a shirt for the mentoring organization that I'm part of called Push for Greatness. And the conversation just led into that. And in the conversation, it's found out that we had a lot of commonalities, right? Even though we're from different places and different spaces, different backgrounds and all that stuff. But you never know these things until you open up and you talk to people, right? And during the conversation, it was like, hey, I have this platform on men mentorship, empowering men, and was able to share some stuff about my journey with him. And here we are.
Yeah, that's basically how it went down, Roscoe. I'm sitting at the bar having dinner, and Philip sits down a couple seats next to me. There was a whole bunch of flight attendants over there, and they were getting salty. And they were just, I had already been listening to it for like 45 minutes. I saw the look on his face, and I just kind of looked at him, and I go, yeah, dude, get ready. This is going to go for a while.
It's just going downhill. Yeah. No, that's great, man. There's a lot of really good things to take away from that story. And I'm really bad about, because like you say, CAS, all the time, you like to self-identify as an introvert. When I'm in public, I don't like to really talk to people too much. Especially in an airport, like the airport to me is like the worst environment on the planet. All right. Nobody is considerate anymore. Everybody's just heads down into their phone, or everybody's in too big of a hurry to be cordial or get out of people's way and generally just kind of be nice, good humans. So I kind of lock it up, man. I put my headphones on and I get to my seat and I just sit there. So I can do a lot better job of talking to the person next to you, because you just never know. Katie is really good at this.
Yeah.
She talks to everybody.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, man. She'll go get her a Jack and Coke and she'll sit at the bar, and before you know it, she's got 10 new friends and they're exchanging business cards. And I'm just not like that, man. Awesome. I'll sit there in silence and read a book or watch a football game.
Yeah. Katie's not hard to be friends with. Yeah. It's the same for me, man. I mean, I'm an introvert, and, but when Philip sat down, I got this vibe from him, and then I saw a shirt And so I thought I'd ask him a question just about the mentorship thing because, I try to be, we talk about staying curious on the podcast a lot, right? And so I try to stay curious. I like to know people. I really enjoy hearing other people's stories. Um, and So I thought I'll ask him a question about the mentorship thing just to see where that goes, because I didn't know if he was there because of the mentorship or if it was just something else. And then I would know, I figured based on how he responded to me, I'd know if he was open to a conversation or not. Right. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, man, we just kind of hit it off and we started talking and one thing led to another and here we are.
Yeah. That's great, man. So Philip, in the bio, he said that you're a CEO father. How many kids do you have?
I have 4 kids, ages 23, 18, 6, and 8 months.
No.
So, well, you said your oldest was 18?
No, my oldest is 23.
Oh, 23. Okay. I blanked
Yes.
out for a second. Is there a ratio of boys to girls in there?
So 3 boys, 1 girl.
Okay. Well, where does the girl fall in the line?
So the girl is the 6-year-old, and the 8-month-old is the baby, and he's literally my twin, like the rest of my kids. They don't look like me, but they act like me. So sometimes they partially look like me, but the baby, yeah. So the daughter, she's the 6-year-old, and she's daddy's princess. And
Well, she's got two big
really, it
brothers
wasn't
to
until
help her out too.
yeah, and it wasn't really until I had a daughter to where I had to recognize, hey, there's some things that I need to be doing to be a man, right? That I wasn't doing, that I
Oh,
wasn't showing her. And ultimately, I didn't want her to grow up one day and bring a guy like who I was home, right? So I had to like really think about some things and change some things up. So daughters definitely brought a different perspective to me in carrying myself like a man.
dude,
Big
it's
impact for 'em.
interesting that you brought that up, man. I was having this conversation recently with some people, and so this is my second book, right? Work hard, don't
Okay.
suck, and I have all boys. And I wrote this book for those boys as my youngest is he just turned 20. So this book
Hmm.
came out a couple years ago, and I wrote it for the boys, and I wrote it from a man's perspective, from a dad and from a husband's perspective, and how to be a man in society now. And I'm passing that down to my boys. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is a girl dad. He's got all girls. And I was explaining to him about the book and where it came from and everything. And he said, "Hey man, don't discount the girls out there too. I know you said you wrote it in a man's voice to men, but you might want to put a note in there that says, hey, girls need to read this too so that they know what to look for in a man." And I hadn't really framed it like that in my mind. And it's interesting that you brought that up. It was almost the same exact thing that he said to me.
Yeah, I mean, almost example. I mean, shameless plug. I think you got the next title for your next book, right? So is to cater it from a man standpoint to a little young lady because that stuff matters.
Yeah, Philip,
Yeah.
I want to say more about that though, man. Like what was it when you had a daughter? Was it about yourself that you realized that maybe you needed to change? Was it, like relationship? Was it emotional regulation? What
Yeah,
what was it,
I mean,
man? Like
it
what was it that
was
you
it, it
realized that
was
had to change?
it was the relationship status, me carrying myself as a man, as a father, just as a person, in general, like you know. Lying, cheating, shameless excuses, all right, not living up to my fullest potential, and just seeing my daughter cry, all right, numerous times that I made her cry, really did not sit well with me in some of my darkest times, and I was alone, and I thought about these things, and I said, hey, I need to tighten up, right? Because if I don't tighten up, well, she's going to bring me a joker just like myself at that time. And we're going to have some problems, right? So
Yeah.
I had to do some self reflection and do some healing and apply some logic to some things, right? And get in tune with my emotions, because that's one thing that I can definitely say that I was not good at, right? Was my
Yeah. I think we all
emotions.
suck at that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt like at certain points in my life, I was a little too emotional, right? I don't have a problem with saying this. I cry,
Hmm.
right? And when I cry, I don't have a problem with publicly displaying that or showing that to her. But sometimes, you know, kids want to see daddy's not crying all the time, and toughen up a little bit and uh, tighten up your shoes, and keep on pushing forward. So, I had to learn a lot of difficult lessons that she opened my eyes to, and I'm extremely thankful for it.
How is that different with the boys, or is it different with the boys?
It's definitely different with the boys because with the boys, well, it's different because you're catering to who you want them to grow up to be, right? In the sense, you want them to grow up to be an outstanding man. As far as for girls and daughters, you want them to know how to pick an outstanding man, to pick a stand-up guy that
Yeah.
eventually that they're going to marry and have a family with, and all this other type of stuff. So, different approach, but I think the same principles still apply, right? With as far as being a man, right, and doing the things that
Yeah.
men are supposed to be doing.
Well, I think you were getting there, and let me see if I can just rephrase it a little bit so that it makes sense to me. But it sounds like
Mm.
you have to carry yourself appropriately for both, right? You have to identify those things that you want both of these, male or female, it doesn't matter. You want them
Right.
to see this particular character trait or attribute about you. So it's neat that you are able to recognize that. And one of the things that keeps coming up over and over, one of the themes is it's never too late to start. And I'm taking that away from your story right now. So you have a 23, an 18, and then your daughter way down the
Mhm.
line down here. And it took that long for you to kind of see that and have that reflected back on you and to realize that. But guess what, man? The sun comes up tomorrow, and that's a fresh start,
Yeah,
and it's a new set of downs in the game. The chains are stretched out, and here you go, buddy. And it's never too late to kick it into gear.
that's correct. I have a saying that I live by. A new day comes a new opportunity, right? So as long as you're able to wake up and you're in your right state of mind and you got breath in your body and your extremities are working, well, here's the opportunity, right? You can't change anything that happened previously before, but you can change today. That will
Yep.
then change the outcome for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, kudos to you, man, for starting that journey. And I'll tell you from my experience, having my kids are a little bit older than some of yours, and I was just having this conversation with my boy this morning about, hey, man, like you've been given new life. You just respawned in the video game with new life and new weapons, right? You're a fresh. You just got all the bad stuff just got washed away from you from the commander. So now reframe your mindset, and every step you take needs to be in that direction. If you slip up again, you might not get another chance
Yeah.
like this. So same principle applies, right? Tomorrow's a new day, a new chance to win, man. Start winning.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so I have
It's
boys
never
and
too late.
girls. I have boys and girls too, Philip. And what I found is
Mhm.
similar to what you said, right? Like I think, you show up in many ways the same, but you have to approach each differently. And this is a generalization because some girls can take more direct feedback than others, and some boys need a little more pampering than others, right? But what I found typically is, especially with girls in the teenage years, they're a little more emotional. Things are a little more raw for them, and so your approach has to be different, right? And I think that that's important because if you show that you can have that balance between, uh, that's a great example of what they should look for, in a partner down the road. Not just the successes that you have, whether they're in your job or how you're able to provide for your family and, you know, those types of things, but also just the emotional space that you can provide um, when that time at the appropriate times. Like, I think that's a huge thing to teach your daughters that men are capable of doing, instead of just going, well, go talk to your mom, right? Or go you deal with it, when it comes to the
Ex-
emotional
ex-
stuff, right? You got to show up as a man in those scenarios if you have daughters. And sometimes it's not easy because sometimes, we want to we're fixers typically, and we want to just jump in and fix it. And you have to end up doing a lot of validation and listening and letting them kind of come to their own conclusions. And that's not easy for us, man. I mean, that's a difficult place to be sometimes, but it's a good lesson for them to learn and what to look for a partner. You know what I mean?
Oh yes, definitely, definitely. And I can correlate that to say it's the reason why we were made with two ears and one mouth. We were
Yeah.
made to listen more than we talk, right?
Seneca.
So
Yeah.
that's definitely a difficult lesson that most people just don't get, right? But when you get it, you get it.
Yeah. So
Well, I'm wondering, and this is again, I only have boys, so I fell
Mhm.
into this trap of I wanted to teach them to be tough and resilient, right? And my method of going about that was, I mean, I did what I did, and I
Mhm.
probably could have showed them a little bit more of my softer side that I really didn't display to them until I don't know, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, I let them see the softer side of me. Um, I wonder if maybe if I would have had girls that would have brought that side of me out earlier, because while you still want to teach your daughter to be tough and resilient, you're going to do it in a very different way.
yeah.
Than with boys, I think it's easy to just be rough and tough with them sometimes, and smack them around and say, "Sorry, that's life." Life sucks. Get a helmet, kind of thing. You don't necessarily probably take that approach with the girls, and
No.
I have no data to support that, but I'm interested to hear your take on that.
I mean, yes, definitely, definitely. It's a different approach, and my daughter's extremely sensitive, right? So, what I've learned from her is I just have to say a certain tone, and if I say my voice in a certain tone, she instantly straightens up. With the boys, I have to do the tone and do the body action and everything that follows with that, right? But with my daughter, it really taught me to say, hey, I can effectively communicate to you because all I have to do is just this basic thing, and you'll uh, tighten up, right, and get your stuff together, and we'll move accordingly. So it's definitely a different approach. But to touch on what you talked about earlier, is that when you said that you just started showing the emotional side or the softer side, that comes with the maturity as us as men, right? As we start to get older,
Yeah, I was going to
all the
mention that
things
in a
that
second.
that
Yep.
we held near and dear to were, it's out the window now, right? Because you have to say, hey, if in order to get something different, you got to do things differently, and you could take that on so many different levels.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and Roscoe, I wonder too if that wasn't just part of your path, brother, just too with starting your own path of self inspection and self reflection when you did kind of if that's what moved you in that direction to kind of be able to show more of that emotional side of yourself to the boys as they were a little bit older, because I think that's
Yeah, it could
important
have
for us to
been.
show too, right? Like that I think it's okay for men to understand that, what, it's okay to get emotional. It's okay to be angry sometimes. It's not okay to overreact in anger, but it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be confused about things, especially when they
Yeah.
start to delve into relationships and things like that,
Yeah.
and so I think it's important for us as fathers to show that side of us to our boys too, because that's how they're going to be well-rounded men. We're the ones that give them that first, hey, it's all right, man. It's okay to be this way. Like, it's okay to cry.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel this emotion. You don't have to bottle it
Yeah.
up and bottle it up and bottle it up until it just fucking explodes one day in some kind of an angry fit or rage, right? That's not what we want. And so, it's part of that emotional regulation that we talk about, and that emotional awareness that we talk
Hmm.
about on the podcast. That's how we help them develop that, I
Yeah,
think.
it could have been it
Yes,
could have
indeed.
been that, and I think Philip hit the nail on the nugget, man. I think that's just part of getting older and
Yeah,
maturity,
it
and
is for sure.
and you as men, I think we can all attest to there was a point somewhere, probably recently within the last 10 years or so, where the grass just got a little bit greener, the sun was a little bit prettier, and things just kind of started, I don't know, slowing down for you, and you were able to do some of that reflection. I mean, Cass, you and I, man, we were in a rat race for 2 decades, dude.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of time for self-reflection when
No.
you're in something like that. And I think, you know, everybody probably has a similar story. Life is hard. And my way of teaching my boys when they were very little was very direct approach. Dude, life is going to keep swinging at you until you learn how to absorb some of these body blows or weave and bob a little bit. It's going to keep pummeling you a little. So I was trying to teach them like that. And only recently, like I remember Caleb, his last football game that he played in high school, they lost the game, and they went to their little huddle, and he got up and he made a beeline right for me. And we both just embraced in this big hug and started crying on each other's shoulders. And because he had devoted his entire life since he was 6 years old to playing football, and now it was over, and it was very final. It was just like, it was like a rug getting ripped out from underneath you. And I remember thinking in that moment, wow, I'm sitting here crying with my 18-year-old, and I'm not ashamed a bit. I think it's cool, and I wish that maybe I would have done a little bit of that, maybe more when they were younger. Just that outward display and show them it's okay, man. It's all right. The way that you framed that discussion when you said it's okay to be emotional, I think that's a slippery slope, because there are some emotions that maybe we want to temper a little bit.
Well,
and,
yeah.
and it's that,
definitely.
it's that reaction and that display of anger or getting cut off in traffic and, those kinds of things. So there is a balance to be had.
There's a total
sure.
balance. My point is, if I had to stress something, what I would stress is it's a both and, right? It's, you've got to teach your boys, or your daughters for that matter, honestly, that life's going to keep swinging, and you're going to have to learn how to bob and weave and take some body blows. And it's okay to have feelings sometimes, and to express emotion sometimes. There's ways to do it properly. Like, it's not okay to get angry, come home and punch a hole in the wall. But I think it's a both and. It's not either or. That's all I was trying to get at, if that makes sense.
No, that's good. So Philip, dude, we totally hijacked the conversation there for a few minutes.
Hey, no problem. No problem.
You sit in your car and don't say shit and enjoy our podcast. No, but this is actually really good. This is actually really good, man, because what we've talked about is, the current version of you. Let's go back maybe an iteration earlier and figure out how we got there. So were you always like this, or did you have to, like, what are some of the things that you had to check yourself on, and what was that process like for you? We love to get down into that self-inspection piece and find out other paths that other people have taken.
Well, and what I would ask too, Philip, to consider in answering Roscoe's question is, what was the messaging you got about how to be a man when you were younger?
The message that I got on how to be a man when I was younger is there was no message, right? It was just do as you're told, shut up, and just I was real quiet when I was younger, so I was very observant, right? Even though I didn't have a dad growing up, my grandfather raised me, but he was 60 years older than me, right? So it was only so much that he could show me. And unfortunately, coming from where I come from, you look for that fatherly figure, you look for that brotherly love, and it turned me to the streets. And I thought that I found father figures. I thought that I found the brotherly love. I thought I found all these things that just turned out to be false, right? It turned out to be more detrimental than good, not only to myself, to the people in my community, to the people that I was associating with, the things that I was doing, right? It was just all the way bad. And just looking back at that now, I just said, man, what a fool. But I thank whoever the higher power is that I'm still here, right? So, no message. It was just pretty much these are the things. If you're paying attention, you know how to carry yourself in. But if you're not paying attention, we're all products of our environment in some form, shape, or fashion. So we learn how we learn, and we just adapt as we go, right? Without having like an actual game plan, an actual method of attack, a method of procedure to do these things. And so life growing up was not the best for me. My mother suffered from mental illness, so grew up in the house. A lot of fighting, a lot of police being called. Police coming to get my mom, and my mom wanted me to go with her, and I'm like, I'm staying here with grandma and grandpa. I'm not going nowhere with you, because we taught that the police are bad and stuff, right? So, stayed there. When my mom got out of a couple of mental institutions, I went and lived with her. Boy, was that a bad move. Ended up staying in the house with her. Ended up being sexually molested by a lady that was staying in the house at that time.
How old were you at this time, Philip?
Oh, I was 12.
12.
12. Yeah. And, you're real immature and you don't have the grasp or the full concept of what these things are. You're just working off of what you've told or what you've been told, what you've seen, and of course, what you're feeling. Right. And based upon that, it just took me down a slippery slope of being attracted to older women. Right. And that was just, oh boy, that was one of the worst things that I could ever do. Right. But I'm thankful because of the older woman. I have my two oldest boys. And outside of that, yeah, it was a very unique and interesting journey that has led me up to this point. I can tell you, I spent a lot of time alone, a lot of time battling with alcohol addiction, drug addiction. Um, but I had to have the willpower to be clean, become clean, right? Not only my mental, but my spiritual and my physical, right? And in this time, once I was able to become clean, I was able to think. I had no distractions. Like my wife had left me, took the kids, and I'm just a mess that's just trying to make it day by day, right? And a lot of time by myself, and I thank whoever the Lord is or the higher power that I'm a very analytical person, and I could self-reflect on a lot of these things. So in my bio, there was something that I mentioned that was called LEIAR, and I pronounce that as LEAR, right? And that pretty much sums up my journey. The L stands for logic, and once you actually can apply some logic to what's going on with you, and you work on your emotional intelligence, then that leads to accountability, and through the accountability comes your resiliency, right? And through your resiliency, a new day comes a new opportunity. Once you have completed these steps and done the soul searching to get yourself in the best position possible, right? And I'm talking about on all particular levels. I used to be close to 300 pounds. My hair was down on my shoulders. I wasn't real confident. My self esteem was really low. And I had to find that within myself because nobody else was going to give that to me, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, I had to love myself, which I did not do, right? And once I started loving myself and saying, hey, from this moment forward, I'm going to do stuff that's going to be satisfactory to me because I'm not getting any younger and I'm tired of losing, right? So
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing. I'm tired of losing. And I said, man, look, first thing, cut my hair. And I don't know where this sign came from, but the moment I cut my hair, like part of my French, I had a threesome, right? And after having that threesome, man, it just said, okay, you are who you are. You're this guy, right? And maybe it just takes certain things like that to happen for you to recognize certain things inside yourself that you didn't recognize. And it was just one of those things for me, right? Because I've always thought that I wasn't this attractive guy, and the woman that I wanted never wanted me until I realized that, hey, focus on you, invest in you, become the best version of yourself. And whatever it is that you're chasing will then turn around and chase you. And I can say to this day, that is the truest thing that I've ever said. Focus on you, love yourself, and instead of you chasing, what you want will come to you.
Gosh, we talk so much about, and one of the things that I harp on over and over and over is just setting a high personal standard. And everything else just kind of falls into place once you do that, because there's a lot of nuance to that simple statement of finding or setting a personal standard. That means getting your mind,
Yes.
body, soul in balance. That means doing this self-reflection and inspection and emotional regularity, like Cass says. And there's so many levels and layers in there. But once you figure that stuff out and you hold yourself accountable to that, then everything else in your life just kind of falls into place, man. And it's interesting to me that every one of us, all three of us, and probably everybody at some point, we all have that epiphany somewhere in our life. And some people get to it younger, and some people get to it a little older, like I did. But it's important to recognize, I think, like you did, man, that your life wasn't going the way that you thought it should be going. And so you put the brakes on, you made a full stop, and you said, something's got to change. And dude, it's funny that you mentioned cut your hair, because when I coach people up, one of the first exercises that I have them do is I say, I want you to go home tonight and strip off all your clothes and stand in front of the mirror naked for 60 seconds and just look at yourself. All right. And I guarantee you'll find something that you can work on. And like you, it was like, you know what? I'm going to cut my hair and see what happens. And then things started to fall into place, so it's something very little. And this journey starts with sometimes the smallest step, the smallest little move forward, like cutting your hair or trimming your beard or whatever it may be. And that could set this ball rolling down the hill, and it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger over time. It's awesome, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, Philip, I would just like to say that like your story is so powerful, dude, and I know we don't know each other that well, but like I'm so proud of you as a man, because the story that you just told, like I can't even imagine to a certain extent the chaos, the instability, and the trauma. Like when you're 12 or younger and you have that kind of stuff going on in your life, like it doesn't set you off on very good footing, right? Like it's just it doesn't give you a place to learn just how to be a kid or how to grow up, or some of these skills that we talk about. And then
just call it what it is, man. It's trauma.
It's total trauma, right? I mean, the fact that you were sexually molested at the age of 12 is trauma, right? And oftentimes when that happens to people, it leads to addiction because we don't have people in our lives, or maybe mentors, or maybe even the opportunity or the privilege to go see healthcare specialists or to see a therapist or things like that to deal with that trauma and to figure it out. And that often leads to addiction, right? Alcohol, drugs, and things like that, because it's an easy way to self-soothe. It's an easy way to,
you got to find a coping mechanism.
Yeah, right. It's a great coping mechanism. And so, but the problem is when that happens to a lot of people, they end up trapped in it, and some people are able to find ways to move past it and do the things that you've done. And other people's aren't, man. They get lost in it. They become alcoholics, or, end up overdosing, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't turn out as well. And so I just like to acknowledge that and just tell you that, dude, I'm proud of you for coming through that and taking the time to be self-inspective and to figure some of those pieces out for yourself. But just going back, because you said, tell me again what LEIAR stands for, because I think that was really cool how you phrase that. And I want the listeners to really capture it.
Yeah, so LEIAR stands for pretty much the steps that if you want to make a change in your life, these are the steps that you're going to need to pretty much do. The L stands for logic. You need to think. You need to think about good, bad. You just need to constantly think, constantly ask questions, and follow up more questions to that, right?
Well, and I like how you said too, you couldn't think until you got clean, right? Because if you've got that stuff occluding your mind, like it's going to be hard for you to get into that logical position. So I think that was a really important point. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely, right? Because I mean, drugs are drugs, and alcohol, another name for alcohol is spirits. You drink the spirits, man, things overtake you, right? And you're not thinking straight. So it comes that time where you got to get clean, get your mind right, and use the greatest tool that everybody has, and that's their brain, right? You use your brain and start thinking about things. And then once you start thinking about things, then the next step is the emotional intelligence. Start saying, well, hey, well, why did I react this way? Well, why does this bother me so much? And it's so introspective that you have to really look at the man in the mirror and face those things, that some things you're going to like, a lot of things you're not going to like. But you have to face those fears, and you have to know that you're in control of all those things. Those things do not control you. Our stories do not control us, do not define us, right? It's all within our control to take the necessary steps to heal, find healthy coping mechanisms, and move forward, all right? So we got the L, we got the E and the I, and the most important one is the A, accountability. Accountability is the biggest thing that I don't see a lot of, especially men, have, right? We're not accountable for our thoughts. We're not accountable for our actions. We're not accountable for the stuff that goes on in our household. the stuff that goes on in our community, and the stuff that goes on out here in the outside world, right? And if we start standing on some form of some morals, values, and principles, maybe these things wouldn't be the way that they are if people were more accountable, right? And through that accountability turns into resiliency. Every day, getting up, fighting that good fight. Say it's a new day, a new opportunity. How can I reflect on what yesterday was and take those reflections and make myself better today and tomorrow?
Yeah, I like that, man. That's awesome.
Dude, I was taking a whole bunch of notes, man.
Yeah, go ahead. I thought you might
think
have a question, Roscoe, so I was kind of pausing to see if you wanted to jump in.
I got tons.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually going to send Philip my microphone and headphones because he's way better at this whole hosting podcast, be one change one shit than I am. I say that in jest, but it really is a journey, man. And one of the things that's been so unique for Cass and I through the journey of the podcast is learning so much from other people, man, because nobody's got it completely figured out, and hopefully you'll walk away from this learning maybe something throughout the thing. And I wanted to throw this out there. One thing that I used to tell the kids all the time, and I have to remind myself of this, is if you don't hold yourself accountable for your actions, somebody else will, and you probably won't like that result. So it's just easier to do it yourself, and that goes back to setting that personal standard and holding yourself to it. I wanted to ask you, dude, like in your story, the way that you were telling it, was there an event at some point, in your later teens or your 20s or 30s, was there an event that happened or some kind of catalyst that made you pump the brakes, that made you go, whoa, dude, like I'm all effed up and I got to fix this?
I can tell you, I mean, there were multiple events in my life. I mean, even going back to being a 12-year-old and having my best friend head blown off right in front of me, and I'm holding his brains. That's one of them. I can say another one is the one that was really the major one was, I would say, just last year, where, of course, I'm getting ready to go through a divorce, and the wife had left, and I'm thinking I'm just this macho man, and I make this money and everything, and creating all these opportunities. But in the real world and in my household, I was nothing, right? Because I was not being the man that I was called to be, right? So I had to do that reflection, that introspective reflection on what was right about me, what was wrong about me. And unfortunately, there was a lot of things that were more wrong than right, right? And when doing so and just being honest with myself and to say, hey, even though these things did happen and even though these things are in the past, new day comes a new opportunity, right? And I can just work on those relationships, foster those relationships. If I can just take a different approach, and every day is a learning lesson because you learn something new every day, right? And what worked yesterday may not work today, right? So you have to have that type of mindset to say, hey, I can reflect, I can adapt, then I can then be resilient in whatever it is that you're called to actually do. And it would definitely be just that moment last year when the wife left me, and what I had the epiphany of is I always used to say in all of my relationships, well, the problem was them. I wasn't the problem, and I outgrew them, and they weren't trying to do this, and they weren't trying to do that. But I come to realize that, hey, that may be true, but I got to own my stuff, right? I wasn't being the man that those women needed me to be. I would just let them do everything, carry all this weight, and I think, hey, I'm just going to work. I'm making this money. Here's this money. Shut up, right? I wasn't being that dad that I needed to be. I wasn't being that man that she needed me to be or wanted me to be. I wasn't being that man to myself, right? I was just indulging in what the world has to offer us, which is unfortunately a lot of guilty pleasures and a lot of pain and suffering if you don't make different decisions. All right. So I just had to call it for myself and say, hey, this is what it is. And going forward, it is no longer acceptable to myself, and it's no longer going to be acceptable to anybody else that I choose to deal with. Right. So going forward. My divorce will be finalized here in December, and all I can say is God is great, man. You know, once you do the work, people think that when we pray to God, we just pray to God, and God's going to just give us everything that we're praying for. But God says, hey, you got to do some work first, right? And if you don't do some work first, and you don't put that work in, yeah, you ain't going to get no reward. No reward. So you got to put that work in. And then once he says, all right, thy faithful servant, I see you working. Now sit back, let me work. And then once he starts working and you doing your part and he does his, man, you'll start to see a lot of things turn around and change for you. A lot of things.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about all the time is, growth is a process, and it's not an easy one. It takes time, but at some point too, like the fruits of that growth start to come really fast, right? Like if you do the work and you stay true to it, and you stay in the process, and you don't focus on the outcome, and you just keep pressing and keep refining and keep trying to get better and better, and each day fix, like Roscoe always likes to say, every day just work on one thing, man, just fix something, and keep moving forward. Like eventually you're going to get to a place where things are going to start to fall in place. And you talked about emotional intelligence, and you've mentioned being self-reflective or self-inspection, and self-awareness is the first part of emotional intelligence. We did a whole series, 2-part series on emotional intelligence. And there's basically the guy that developed it, Daniel Goldman, basically breaks it down into 4 parts. And the first one's self-awareness. And so what I was going to ask you, Philip, is because Roscoe and I stress this on the podcast too, but people's stories resonate different with other people. And that
Mhm.
self-inspection piece, I think, is really difficult, because at the end of the day, if you can't be honest with yourself, if you can't look yourself in the mirror and go, dude, I'm screwing this up, and here's some things I need to work on. If you can't have that honesty with yourself, then dude, you're not going to have it with other people, and none of your relationships are going to be very fulfilling. I'm here to tell you that right now, right? None of them. You're never going to get to be that well-rounded individual. Oh, and by the way, we're hardwired for connection. You're never going to be able to have the types of relationships that you really want to have, because you can't be honest with yourself. And so tell me about how important, and also like how difficult, what were the, not necessarily, you don't have to name like what were the things that you recognize about yourself that you need to change, but I know when I've gone through this process, I've recognized things about myself and I'm like, I need to change that. But that change doesn't happen overnight. And I would go out and I would try to get better at something. And on some days I'd do really well. And then on other days I'd completely fuck it away. Like I would
Yeah,
fail
yeah.
over and over and over again. And it becomes, you have to keep attacking these things in a manner where whatever you're trying to fix becomes habitual, right? It doesn't become something that you have to
Mhm.
think about in the moment and go, how should I respond to this? You just start to learn how to respond in the manner that you want to show up in, right? Does that make sense? And so can
Mm.
you talk about
Oh
how
yeah,
that process unfolded for you, Philip? Like what were the things that you struggled with, man? And what were the wins and failures at times?
I would think, and this is something that I still struggle with to this day. You know, us as men, we have egos and we have a pride. We have our pride, right? And our ego and pride gets in the way of a lot of things, right? Our ego and pride will lie to us. Our ego and pride will tell us things that we just thought up inside our head is true, right? But it's not until we're absolutely being honest with ourselves and having that conversation with ourselves and saying, hey, well, you did this. Well, you did that. Well, why? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And then once you get down to the answers of the reason why you did these particular things, usually those things are very selfish, right? At least from my standpoint, was very selfish, and I was only thinking about me, me. Unfortunately, as a man, and if you're in a relationship, married, have kids, it no longer is about you. It's about us, right? So just taking that standpoint to say, hey, not about me. It's maybe partially about me, but it's about the future. It's about the relationship. Um,
Yeah, it's bigger than just you.
all that stuff matters. Yeah, all that stuff matters. That stuff matters. But if I would have to say at least what was it for me, it was my ego and my pride that told me, hey, because I made a certain amount of money and I was doing this and doing that, that I can do pretty much whatever I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I hit that rock bottom, right? That rock bottom where contract that I had ended, the money stopped flowing in. I still had this lifestyle that I had to maintain. I still wanted to do the things that I always did that I could no longer do because of my ego and my pride, right? I couldn't call somebody up that I've done stuff for and say, "Hey, can I get my favor back?" Like, no, that's not what you do, right? If you do it genuinely for somebody, you expect nothing in return. So my ego and pride put me in a position to where I just said, "Hey, uh, you're full of shit, right? And you need to really get your shit together, man, and think about the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the future men that you're raising, the future woman that you're raising, um, and not only that, but still with the breath that's still in my body, the future that I have left also, right? Um, even though I'm transitioning from the third into the fourth quarter, right? Well, maybe I'm just getting out of halftime, right? And I done sat in the locker room and I talked to the head coach, and I got a different game plan now, right? And pretty much threw what was in the first and second quarter out, revamped my game plan, and here I am in the third and fourth quarter, ready to win. So, yeah.
That's great. Dude, one of the chapters in this book, it says the title of the chapter is "Everything You Need to Know about Life You Can Learn from the Game of Football." And you just summed up that whole chapter right
Yeah,
there.
you sure did.
Because literally you could take a football game and you could make nearly every life analogy out of something in a football game. That's epic.
Yeah.
What I wanted to comment on though was, as you were
Mhm.
telling that little vignette, was the antidote to ego and pride is humility. And I think it takes us, a lot of times it takes us either some kind of cataclysmic event or just a long
Mhm.
time to figure that out, right? And I know grown ass men who have lost job opportunities, who have made very poor life decisions and put themselves in corners, all out of pride. And my
Mhm.
question to them, or maybe even to you, would be like, what cost are you willing to pay? What price are you willing to pay to maintain your pride? Because isn't it just easier to say, you know what, dude, I fucked that up, and move on and make a make a good decision and kind of get the train back on the tracks? Because I think that
Right.
pride, if you're making decisions out of pride, it's like making emotional decisions, right? They're rarely regulated, they're rarely objective, they're usually rooted in something that's not quantifiable, and you end up going off on this tangent in your life. And as we get older, man, we just don't have the time for that shit, you know.
Right.
Like we're starting to see, like, you know, I was having a talk with my mom today about her getting on social security and Medicaid and all
Mhm.
this stuff, and I'm like, holy crap, man, that's only 20 years from now for me, you know. So like our time horizon is getting shorter and shorter. So what's the
Yes.
cost that you're willing to pay to maintain your pride?
So let me share a story with you, right? So it's a reason why I'm not in California now, right? Like I told you, I'm going through a divorce, right? I've got a 6-year-old and a 8-month-old son, and I could have took that opportunity in California, been traveling throughout the world, but would have been missing out on my son's first birthday. I would have been missing out on taking my daughter to school every single day and having these relationships for what, just a dollar, right? And money's cool, right? And money is just a tool or a resource that's based for us to live, right? And that's it. But at what cost are you willing to go after that dollar for, right? And so I ended up turning that opportunity down, right? Because again, I'm going to be missing out on what's most important in my life. And I know that if I have these skills and I have these certain traits and all these things, then what's meant for me is going to be meant for me, right? Now, any smart man is going to also have other things lined up and in the works to make sure that that money still comes in because the bills don't stop, right? Childcare doesn't stop, and if we know, like our kids are, well, with my son, diapers are more expensive, milk is more expensive nowadays, right? So you just have to do these things to to make it happen. But I would definitely say money should not be the answer, right? What should really be the answer is whatever your values are, right? Whatever your values are, those are the things that you hold near and dear to, and you don't bend, break, or fold on any of those values, no matter what.
Yeah.
It's great that you put it like that, man. And Cass, I'll turn it over to you in a second, but I want to piggyback on this little story that you were just telling. My next door neighbor, they're I want to say he's like 28, 29 years old. He's not a teenager anymore. He's not a kid anymore. He's a grown ass man. He's got a civil engineering degree and he's been living at home with
Hmm.
them. He's the only child. He works here in town. Well, he got an opportunity to take a job that was going to pay a lot more, but it was over in
Hmm.
like Odessa, Midland, Texas, which if you've never been to that area, it's the butthole of Texas. It's like the
Yes,
worst
nothing's there.
part. It's
Yeah.
terrible, right? Um, so I mean, you can bump a chalk line from Odessa to Fort Worth. It's like it's barren. But they were
Hmm.
on their journey over there, and mom and dad, they loaded up the camper and stuff because they were going to stay in the camper for a few weeks while he kind of got settled in. And they got over to El Paso area, going down I-10, and they had a flat tire on the trailer, and one of the shackles on the axle broke. So they pull
Ooh.
off to the side. They got their insurance, whoever that was. They came out there. They started doing the repairs, and it ended up taking a lot longer than they wanted to. And so they
Mhm.
ended up just camping out in a Walmart parking lot that night. Which, if you guys haven't done that yet, it's an adventure. You should
I've
go
actually done
rent
it.
an RV
I've
and
actually.
spend the night in a Walmart parking lot. It's sometimes real life is better comedy than anything you can write. I'll just say that. So
Yes,
they're
indeed.
sitting in the camper in the Walmart parking lot, and the
Hmm.
son looks at the dad and says, "Would you be mad at me if I said I just wanted to go home?" And the dad said, "No, man. You make your decision. I'll drive you to Odessa, or I'll turn
Hmm.
around and we'll go back home." And he ended up coming back home, and I was hanging out with him a few days later in the driveway out here. We were working on some stuff, and we got to talking, and I asked him about it. He told me, and I looked right at the kid. I say the kid, the boy, and I said, "Hey, dude,
You're right.
just keep chopping wood, man. Like life will work itself out. If there's one thing that I've learned, man, it's like just do the right things, make good decisions, and life will present opportunities to you." And no kidding, last weekend I was out there in the driveway talking to them, and they go, "Hey, remember when you told me the other day that some things were gonna things would just fall into place? I got a job
Hmm.
offer down here, making more than I'm making
How
now,
about
right
that?
here in town." And I said, "See, dude, so back to what you're and the reason I said that I told that story was you said make decisions in accordance with your values. Well, clearly one of his values is family and being close to family.
Hmm.
And if he'd have gone to Texas over here, he violates that. And
Yep.
he ended up, whether it was homesickness or daddy attachment, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. He made his decision based on his values, and lo and behold, shit just works out.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Well, you
Yes,
know
it
why
does.
there's one star on the Texas flag, right? That's the
No,
review.
tell me.
It's a 1-star review. Anyways, yeah, dude, no, I was gonna say sorry. It's just whatever. We don't define
That was a good one.
we talk all the time, Roscoe and I, about, everybody defines success differently. Um,
Hmm.
and I think when we're younger, a lot of times, let's be honest, right? When you're younger, you're chasing a carrot a lot, right? Because you're trying to establish yourself in a career. You may be trying to, make yourself financially stable, and you need to chase those things, right? Because part of our job as men, not always, but if you are the primary breadwinner in a family, like, your job is to try to create financial stability for your family long term. Um,
Yes.
and But what I was going to say was what you said, Philip. Like, you can't, if you don't take the time to be self-inspective or have that self-reflection, then um you can't define your personal values. And if you don't know what your personal values are, there's no way for you to practice integrity on a day-to-day basis. There's no way for you to show up and be congruent in your actions and in your behavior and in your decisions, because you don't know where it's coming from. So in the moment, there may be times where you make really good decisions, and there may be times where you make really poor decisions because it's not anchored to anything, right? And so that's why that self-inspection piece and defining those values for yourself are so important, because if you had been able to do that when you were younger, you may have still been in a position where you were making a lot of money, but maybe you would have been able to make different choices that would have been able to foster those relationships, or to give you the space to build the relationships that you really wanted to have, or that you've realized that are important to you now, right? And we've done this. We've had a couple podcasts where we talk about lessons. I think at the beginning of this year, when we were doing New Year's resolutions and stuff, we did a podcast where we had read this article, and it was all these men that were in their 50s and 60s, and they were basically going over, what they would have done differently, and a lot of them, they defined success for themselves by how much money they made. And that was the only focus they had. And dude, the fucking carnage behind them in relationships with their wives, relationships with their children's, relationships with coworkers, they got to this point in their life where, guess what? They'd made a bunch of money and they had a bunch of toys and they had fucking nobody to share it with.
Because I wasn't happy.
Yeah, right. Because they had left, scarred earth along that entire path in the chase of an almighty dollar. So I think that's a really good point. And that's what and that's why the podcast is, define values, practice integrity, and inspire change, because you define your values. That allows you to practice integrity. You're not always going to get it right. Sometimes you're going to make mistakes, but at least you're moving in the right direction. And then, like you were talking about earlier, I don't know if it was the beginning or if it was in the pregame, but dude, you never know who's watching, and how you show up in the world matters. How you add value in situations matters, and people are going to recognize that. And if they're courageous enough, they're going to come up to you and they're going to go, "Hey dude, how do you do that? Tell me, how did you get to where you're at?" Right. And that opens up that door to inspire change in people's lives. Right. And to help. And that's the mentorship piece of it. Right. That's what allows that opportunity for formal or informal mentorship. So I would assume you agree with those things. But
definitely.
Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's kind of a segue into talking about mentorship for a minute. And is there times in your life where mentorship has made an impact for you personally, or do you want to share any of the stories from just your role as a mentor in the program that you're working for, P4G, or we're not working for, but working with, and the impact that's had on your life?
So yes, definitely. Push for Greatness has definitely made a huge impact on my life. I would say in good ways and in bad ways. In the good ways is that you have young men who don't have father figures in their house, or their fathers are active, but they're not present. Right. So you can have an active father, but you not be present. So in that mentorship piece, I was able to be that positive male role model for them that they needed to see. Unfortunately, the downside to that is it takes a team effort. It takes a team effort on not only the mentors piece, the mom's piece, the dad's piece, the grandma, the auntie, the uncle. It takes all these pieces together for us to get on that single track, to propel these young men in the direction that they need to be propelled in. And unfortunately, one of the things that was really difficult for me was dealing with the emotional damage that these young men have. And it actually traumatized me because I had to relive some of my stuff.
I was just going to say, I bet it brought up about your history for you.
And having to relive that and not knowing exactly what to say, because unfortunately the downside to mentorship that I've realized is they look at you that you have all the answers, and sometimes in some cases we don't, right? And only thing is that we can just try to provide words of encouragement, provide that support, and just be that pillar that sometimes they need to stand on, that they need to lean on. right? For them to sometimes just to be heard, right? Because it's better to blow it out instead of holding it in, right? So sometimes it's good to be that listening ear, right? So it's the reason why we have two ears and one mouth, even though sometimes I like to talk, but it, it it is best for us to listen, right? And to really hear and then think, right? And then we say, okay, how can we approach this to the individual to where it's going to resonate with him, right? And in doing so, um, part of it is the video conversations, mentorship, right? And then also being actually showing up in real life, right? And going to their practice games, going to their games, going to their schools, right? Taking them to the library, help them with their homework, right? And in the meantime, you still have to do that with your own kids, right? So finding that particular balance, and I'm a firm believer in you can knock out multiple birds with one stone if you just think about how you're going to be able to do it. So I was able to pick up my kids, go pick up the kids from the mentor. We jump in the car. Hey, we're going to the library, right? And most kids don't talk a lot. They're very observant, right? So they'll see how you are with your kids. They see how you are conducting yourself in these public places, right? And if you can be that example, just be that example. Show them something different because they get the same old every day, right? And it's just about really just taking that opportunity. So mentorship was important for me, but due to the trauma that I was dealing with, it got a little bit too much for me, and I had to back away. And now I found that I'm mentoring somebody that's my age who's going through what I went through, and I'm able to help him through these things. And I find that mentoring men is a little bit easier, right? They can understand real life things that are going on, and I think that's really what my calling is geared towards. The kids, not so much. I think that I would have to be a trained clinical psychologist to be able to deal with some of the stuff
Yeah.
that they deal with at an early age that they, number one, shouldn't have to even deal with,
Yeah.
right? But just having that emotional and mental strength and fortitude to be able to deal with some of those issues, because life be life, man.
Yeah.
So,
Dude, I
yeah.
was a youth football coach for a lot of years, and I know exactly
Hmm.
what you're talking about. I had a kid
Yeah.
burst out into tears one time because I told him to tie his shoe. When you're dealing with, and sometimes it doesn't matter. Like on a football team, it was all boys, and
Right.
I don't have any data points for coaching or being around a group of girls, but I can imagine it's very similar where, they hit that 11, 12, 13 years old and they're going through a lot of changes. They don't understand it. They don't know how to express themselves. And, I think on a football field, it was easy to mask over a lot of that stuff because you're supposed to be tough. Just shut up and buckle your helmet and put your mouthpiece in. Get to the Oklahoma drill, and stop crying. There's no crying in football, and I think we got away with that a little bit on a football field. I wonder
Mhm.
if I were to go back and do that again, if I maybe handled those situations a little bit different, maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would be a hard ass coach and just blow the whistle and tell them to get on the line. But I think you're right, man. I think that, something CAS says all the time is you have to find the way to connect with an individual, and individuals respond to different stimuli. And some people are different. They learn differently. They communicate differently. I'm about to sneeze. This is bad.
Go ahead and get it out, brother. Go ahead
Thank
and get it
God for
out.
the
Bless
mute
you.
button. Holy
Yeah,
shit. You guys didn't need to
seriously.
hear that. Next time I'll just go right into the microphone. We like to keep things entertaining and light around here. One thing about our
Hey, why
podcast, man,
not?
is you never know what's going to come out of my mouth next. Cass
This
is
is
fairly
true.
predictable because
Yeah.
he's the brainiac of the group. Like he'll recite some research project from the 1980s or something and give us the 3 data points out of the abstract of it. Me, I'm just like, fuck, well, I'm going to tell you this one story about that one time that I got never mind. So anyways, back to that, the mentorship thing. I'm curious, how did you
Hmm.
get involved in P4G? Did somebody
All right.
like,
So,
was one of your friends in it? Was it like a church club or something? Like, how did you find out about them and get involved with it?
So how I got involved with Push for Greatness or P4G was through my fraternity that I'm a part of. Part of my fraternity is to help young men live up to their fullest potential, right? And so we did a partnership with Push for Greatness to where a couple of my frat brothers were able to come on and be mentors to these kids for us to be living what our mission statement and our purpose is, right? And pretty much to be one, change one, right? So if I can be that one to help change that one, that was the actual goal. And that goal was to also to help our fraternity have stronger community ties with what's going on, and that could hopefully lead into future opportunities for the mentorship program.
I don't know what happened there. There was a lot of feedback came through there.
You still
Hey, on a lighter note though, I was told once upon a time in my college days that you don't call your fraternity a frat because you wouldn't call your country a. Let's just move on. I'll let you guys think about that one for a second. Yeah, well, that was my experience. let me reframe. Let me reframe what you said into something that it's a common thing that we talk about here is the people you surround yourself with, right? And if what was it? There was somebody real famous that said, "Show me who you hang out with, and I'll show you who you're going to be in 5 years," or something similar to that. I'm paraphrasing someone. So in your case, just exactly what you said, right? You have to isolate those things. You have to identify the behaviors that you don't want to be associated with anymore. And one of the things that I say over and over and over again is you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? Well, if you want that average to be very high and you want it to be reputable, then you surround yourself with those types of people that can elevate you, like you said. So you isolate the bad behaviors, you focus on the good things, right? And that's not to say that you can only hang out with 5 people. You need 5 people that you go to church with. You need 5 people that you go to the gym with. You need 5 people that you hang out with on a fire pit on Friday nights. 5 people that you can call and tell your deepest, darkest secrets. You know, all these little groups, and it becomes like this little constellation of people. When you look at it, it's like looking at the stars. Okay, but where it gets really cool, man, and this is where we were going in the pregame, is when you realize that each one of those people, they have their own constellations too. And in every group, now it's just a multiplication factor, man. It's exponential, right? So that's the power of influence that you can have on other people, right? If you surround yourself with this good group of people and you all elevate each other and you all, like Cass, just look at what we've done in the Spartan race prep, man.
Yeah.
And the way that the 3 of us have challenged each other and kept pushing forward a little bit more, man, that's just boosted our game that much more.
Yep.
And you know what? There might be somebody out on that race start line that looks at one of the 3 of us and goes, "Hey, man, if these old farts can do this, I can do this."
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, and it boosts their confidence. And that's the power of influence. You know, you just never know, and it's that ripple effect, that exponential growth of those constellations that you have out there. So what you're doing with your group when you're mentoring all those kids, 15 years from now, they're going to be mentoring a group of kids, or they're going to be coaching a football team, and they're going to be like, "Hey, I had this one guy in my life 15 years ago, and he told me XYZ. He gave me this one solid piece of advice that just stuck with me for a long time." That's powerful, dude.
Yeah, it is.
Cass knows all about making a huge impact with a little thing. So
thanks.
See, I told you, man, totally unpredictable. You never know what's coming. He's done a lot with the little things. I'm just saying.
Appreciate that, Roscoe.
I'm here for you, buddy. I'm here. Emotional support.
Yeah.
I'll be your emotional support animal.
Yeah, I might need to rethink my 1 of 5.
Right. Seriously. I just got kicked out of the group. Damn it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right. I think we've gotten terribly off track here.
We totally have.
Terribly off track. Yes. Hey, Cass, you made a comment earlier, and I wrote something down here, man. There was a dude in 1992, 1993 that did this big ass hike up in Alaska, and he ends up in this bus for like 4 or 5 months by himself. John Krakauer wrote a book about it. Sean Penn made a movie about it. I hiked out to that bus, and that's what my first book was based on. And in the research for that book, I got a hold of several pages of this dude's diary. It's on the internet. You can go look it up. It wasn't anything super special or anything. But one of the things that I wrote down out of there was, he's out there in the Alaskan wilderness all by himself. So he's got tons of time to reflect and find himself and all this. And one of the lines, one of his entries was, happiness is only real when shared. And you were talking about that a little bit earlier, Cass, and it just made me think about, I think there's a time and a place, Philip, to be isolated and put yourself in timeout and do that reflection. But on the other hand, like Cass was saying, you work, and you gather all these cool things in your life. But then at the end of it, you've busted all the relationships and you don't have anybody to share that with. Then what was it worth? Right? I know I've been guilty of that in my career. I can look back at times in my career where I was so myopically focused on what my next task was, what my next event was, what my next flight was, etc. How do I climb the ladder? How do I do XYZ to look better to the commander or whatever so that I can get a promotion? And I missed out on the little things that was going on in my own house. Like, I can tell you exactly what it looked, smelled, felt like to fly from Pensacola to New Orleans and back right after Katrina hit. I can describe it in great detail, but I can't tell you a few weeks around that same period. I can't tell you what my kid got for his 3rd birthday or what his birthday cake looked like. I remember the pictures, but I don't remember the event, right? So happiness is only real when shared. And I think how we bring that to Be One, Change One is maintaining those relationships.
Yeah.
Having that balance in your life so that you don't set yourself into isolation and burn all these bridges down, right? And you maintain those relationships going forward, and you find the balance of how much is it going to cost me to do this thing that I want to do? Like taking your job in California. How many bridges would you have burned if you would have taken that job in California? And when you start looking at it like that, I think it helps you start to make some good decisions.
Yeah. And you know what? Your value may be make a lot of money. And, if that's the case, then maybe that's what you do. And you look to build relationships in other places as you move in other directions. But that's why the importance of values that's why the values exercise is so important, because you have to define that stuff for yourself. Otherwise, you find yourself being that 55-year-old guy who, just got fired as the VP and nobody wants to hire you because you burned so many bridges along the way. And all those people that you pissed off as you were moving up the ranks are now the VPs in all these other companies, and they don't want to have any
all those toes you stepped on.
That's right. And that's the way it cuts sometimes, man. And so, Brene Brown says over and over again that we are hardwired for connection. And, how many connections we need, I think varies for all of us. But at the end of the day, man, we're hardwired to be in relationship with one another. And, at the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed, who cares if you got, a pallet full of money next to you and a bunch of plaques that said you were salesman of the year or the best fighter pilot that ever lived, and there's nobody else in the room. Like on that day, you want to have all those people that you've had these relationships with, that you love and that you've been able to share and express, and build memories with around you. That's what's important. To me anyway.
Well, and how much of that though is us sitting here at, half a century old with experience? And one comment that I was going to make that I forgot about, Philip, was when you were telling your story, was in order for you to be old and wise, you first have to be young and stupid. You have to make mistakes so that you can learn from them. And that's called experience, right? So now here we are sitting here at half a century and we've got some experience. We don't know it all. I'm not going to pretend to. Work in progress. I say that in our opening statements to the show. But how much of that, if we were to go back when we were in our early 20s or mid 20s, were we ready to make some of these decisions? Were we? I would dare say that any of us weren't experienced enough yet. We just hadn't lived enough life, and we hadn't had those. And no matter how many books you read, sometimes it's just like, whatever, scoff. I'm 25 years old. I'm the king of the college campus or whatever it is. You think you're immortal and invincible, right? And it takes a couple of those body blows from life to kind of knock you back down to reality. And that's how you gain that experience, so that when you're sitting here where we are now, maybe we can pull that kid aside in the 4PG and say, hey man, let me tell you a story about when I was your age, and hopefully some part of that will resonate with that boy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you, Roscoe. I think, it's an evolutionary process, and you're going to continue to refine and build skills along the way. But like Philip saying, if you can be smart up front and a little more disciplined about it, like I'm not saying don't go out and have fun on Friday night when you're 25 years old, right? But you can also be disciplined about how you want to show up and how you want to add value and how you want to represent yourself in the world. And you do that by, you can do self-inspection when you're 25. You may not be that good at it,
sure.
But you can define your personal values. You can figure out how you want to align those things with your actions and your behaviors and thoughts. I wish somebody, like we say on the podcast, man, this is the show I wish I would have had when I was a younger man. I wish I would have done that when I was younger. I don't know that it would have changed my trajectory and some of the decisions that I would have made in my life as far as my career path went. But I guarantee you, I would have fostered more relationships. I would have taken the time to foster some more relationships along that road. And who knows, if I had done that, what different opportunities would be available to me now that I'm on the other side of the military, So anyways, well, Philip, it was a pleasure to have you on, buddy. Some great takeaways for today. I love the LEIAR, like the leadership, the emotional intelligence, the accountability. It leads to resiliency and how to build those skills. You left us with a lot of great points today. As we wrap up, is there anything in particular that you'd like to plug? Brother, it was a pleasure meeting you, and thanks for having the courage to come on. I really appreciate your honesty with us on the podcast, and talking about some things that are pretty heavy from your past, and how you've overcome those things. I think your story is very powerful, and it was a pleasure to have you on and to be able to share that story with the Be One Change in One community. So thanks, brother. Yeah, hey guys. So we had some, guess what? Roscoe and I suck at this. So we had some technical difficulties, and we lost in the recording. We lost like the last 5 to 6 minutes of the conversation that we were having with Philip. But the first part was so good, and it was such a good conversation that we didn't really want to try to reattack it, because there's some really good stuff that he talked about in there. And so we're just going to kind of fill in the last few minutes that we lost on the conversation. So we were just having that conversation around mentorship, and the importance that mentorship plays, and that kind of led into the conversation that you guys have had us heard or talk about before, like that 1 of 5, and the people that you surround yourself with are really important, and the value of mentorship. And sometimes mentorship doesn't even need to be providing advice for people or necessarily telling people how to do certain things. Sometimes it's just allowing people to be heard. That was one thing that Philip was hitting on, with some of these younger kids that he works with. That they don't have a space, they don't have a place that's safe enough for them to just express what they're going through and to really have those vulnerable conversations. Vulnerability was another thing that came up, right? And that's one of those things that is important for us to share and show as men, is some vulnerability, and to be transparent and to be able to talk to each other and go, yeah, dude, I can totally relate, because here's how I've screwed that up too. And, and to show some empathy in those situations. So Roscoe, what were your takeaways?
Well, there was one comment that he made in there that I don't think made it into the final recording, but he was talking about how he kind of started the process. Was, first of all, it was recognition, and the second thing is he had to isolate himself. And the way that he said it was he almost just put himself on an island. And I think go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that there's a time and a place for isolation.
You there, buddy?
And yeah.
I lost you for a second. Yeah. Yeah, he said isolation leads to elevation, and you got to realign and refocus.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a time and a place for isolation. I think it's good to spend some time alone with yourself and with your thoughts. And I think it's important to segregate yourself away from the influences that you don't want to be associated with anymore. Yeah. On the other side of that same coin is surround yourself with good people. Right. Yeah. So, find a support system, find the people that will help you elevate. And so I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that we're trying to solve all these problems isolated and by ourselves. It
That's right.
takes a village, right? And I think if you can surround yourself with a good group of people who help you move forward and build on yesterday, then I think you're going to be doing pretty good.
Yeah, and the isolation piece, I think, is really just, like sometimes you do have to move away in order to have that space to self-reflect, or to maybe move away from, some poor influences or things like that. But it's not isolation in the sense of like all by yourself, right? You still need that group of people. You still need that support system around you, however you can build that. And that also led to a good conversation that we had just about the bottom line is, like we've talked about, Brene Brown talks about, like, we're hardwired for connection. Like relationships, and the relationships that you build with people are important in life. And so, build good relationships, with people that are going to be positive for you, that are going to help you on this journey, that are going to support you through this process. Those are the things that you want to look for.
Yeah. As you were thinking, or as you were talking about that, I was just thinking about, if I pull a loaf of bread out of the bread box and one of the end pieces has a little bit of mold on it, I might not throw the whole loaf away. I might just throw away those couple of pieces and isolate those away, because the rest of the loaf is still pretty good, right? And maybe we can do that in our life. We can cut those cancerous pieces out of our life, or, move away from the behaviors that aren't helping you attain your goals. And right at the end, he mentioned set goals and start working towards them. And I would add to that, surround yourself with people who are champions for you to reach those goals. And I actually just got a text. I meant to say this earlier, but I got a text from Devin that he went and bought himself a new Mustang, and he celebrated getting his bachelor's degree.
That's cool.
I mean, that's a long journey for him.
Yeah.
He's been on that journey for 5 or 6 years, and he finally completed his goal. So he went and rewarded himself. Yeah.
Right on. That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, Philip was just plugging P4G, so that Push for Greatness mentorship program that he works with in the Maryland and DC area. And they're on social media, just P and then 4 and G. You can find them on social media. I think you looked up the website earlier.
Yep, I'm looking at it right now.
What's the website?
Pushforgreatness.org. It's a pretty good, looks like a pretty good website. And right up on the top level, it's just, hey, welcome. There's greatness inside of you.
Yeah.
What a great tagline, man.
Yeah, seriously.
Because, for the people that he's probably dealing with, they've never been told that before.
Yeah.
They've never been told that, dude, you can do this, man. That's not part of the traditional messaging that they've had in their life.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
old, somebody's keeping you down. There's no way that you can elevate. There's no way that you can get there from here. Well, the truth is, man, you can, right?
Yeah.
If you start making some small changes in your life, you can do this.
Yeah. And for all the ones out there, that's why we do this every week, man. It's because you are more capable than you think you are. You have that greatness in you. You can do these things. They're hard sometimes, but you can do them, guys. And so just get a plan together, keep pushing, keep pressing. You'll get there.
Yeah. Well, I can't say it any better than that. So, assuming you don't have anything else to tag on, man, I say brother. Be the change.
Be the one.
All right. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website, and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.